More than 50 years after the federal government's war on poverty, the country's economic inequality has grown dramatically. That's among many reasons for a teach-in about poverty being held this Saturday. The event sponsored by the Union of Minority Neighborhoods and the Phillips Brooks House Association. To fill us in is the union's executive director, Horace Small. Thank you very much for being with us, Horace.
Chris, it's good to see you again, my friend.
I referenced the war on poverty back in the 1960s, and in some ways, things have gotten worse. I guess, how are you going to respond to that with this teach-in?
Well, I think what we're trying to do with this teach-in is not so much focus on what's going on nationally, but what's happening locally. What's happening in Massachusetts. And in Massachusetts, I mean, the numbers are pretty startling. I mean, let's start with last year, as you obviously know, the Federal Reserve came out with their piece that said that the net worth of African Americans is $8. The net worth of a Dominican is $0. Recent study came out, I forgot what university it was, that said that more than 70% of the people who live in the Commonwealth are 3 or 4 paychecks short from actually being in poverty and homelessness themselves. We have dentists who won't take Mass Health, because they don't take it for poor people. Consequently, was it 96 or 97% of African American seniors who live in the Route 128 area have less than 6 of their own natural teeth? 45% of the children in this city have not seen a dentist. So we like to think that we're taking our minds off of Donald Trump. We like to think that what we're trying to do, Chris, is to focus people's attention on what's important. Because not only are there issues of poverty and that since the federal government has abdicated its role towards poor people and working people, that the burden is going to be on the state. Now, the flip side is that there are, in fact, some legislative solutions that have been put into play that can actually help address that. So in a couple of ways, the teach-in one is to help raise people's consciousness a little bit. Have them understand that what you're facing right now is really real. The second is that, armed with the knowledge, know what people are trying to do to solve the problem. And the third thing is, what are you going to do? And we'd like to think that coming out of this, there will be, in fact, a cadre of people who will be down at the State House, who will be fighting for a fair budget, who will be fighting to extend the minimum, the $15 an hour minimum wage, who will be working to make sure that the legislation that's currently in place by Harriet Chandler to create dental care for poor people happens, to understand what's going on with, with food inequality. I think once people are armed with the information, I think they're going to be prepared to act. At least that's the hope.
And of course, you could add to that plate the inequalities in spending on education.
Absolutely.
You got the whole criminal justice reform.
Women,
question.
poverty in women, poverty, and just a whole number of things. Youth employment. We have a number of different actors. Student loans. Neil Swidley from the Boston Globe, who did that landmark study a couple of years ago on how student loans are impacting poverty in this Commonwealth and around the country. He's presenting. Naomi Meyer is going to talk, and Marjorie Decker, the state rep. They're going to be talking about the childhood cap on kids, which hasn't been raised since 1972. Jamie Eldridge is going to be the state senator, and some others are going to be talking about the fight for 15. I think that if people come with, we got to do something, with the attitude that we have to do something, this is probably the best event that anybody could go to for right now.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Horace Small from the Union of Minority Neighborhoods. Horace, we live in a very different economy from back in the 1960s. We have this big gap between the jobs that pay well for people with lots of skills and education and the other jobs. Is the minimum wage increase the only way to deal with that, you think?
Well, I think that there's a number of ways to deal with it, but I think one of the things that we're focusing on is what's in play right now. Because the minimum wage obviously is not, is just one factor to trying to solve this problem, particularly in light of the fact that 35% of this, more than 50% of the city makes less than $35,000 a year. I find it amazing that poor people and working class people actually have housing in this town. on $35,000 a year. So there really needs to be a conversation about how corporations, how businesses can begin to start, paying livable wages. I mean, that was basically the premise of what Donald Trump was talking about with the tax cuts. And instead, what we're seeing is corporations and businesses. I have a friend of mine who's executive vice president over at Toys R Us. He just moved to Denver. They had just moved him to Denver. Now he's going to be out of a job after 23 years. So we feel that the minimum wage, because it's in play right now, because that legislation is already in the hopper, and with a little help, with a little push of legislators, with a little pushing of the speaker and the majority leader, maybe that $15 an hour can be real. But another thing, though, too, Chris, is that we also need a victory. We need to win something, right? Because that's what precipitates, and that's what gets people engaged and involved. And we're hoping that coming out of this, that people can begin to start thinking more broadly about how we address poverty and issues of income inequality in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in particular.
Well, we have another issue about gun violence in this country. And for a long time, we were polarized. It seems that nothing would change. And then we saw what happened this weekend with those young people leading those marches.
I was there. Were you there?
I was certainly. I was at the one in Boston.
I was the one in Boston. It was just like I actually, the first time in my life, I actually felt like an old man because I was looking at those children, Chris, and I couldn't help but cry. I couldn't help but tear up because I feel good knowing that there's a group of young kids, a group of children who are coming together, who are speaking out, and who are showing their power. And while I was very happy about that, I was also really sad too, because unlike you and me, we had a childhood. We didn't have to worry about people coming into our high schools or grade schools shooting it up. We can be in extracurriculars, which a lot of kids don't have. I was in speech and debate and world affairs and all kinds of different things. Many of these kids don't have them. It's not football, basketball, baseball, it's ROTC. They're missing out on so much. And probably the thing that was really sad for me, as much as I loved watching these children stand up for justice and stand up for themselves, it was the knowledge that these 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids have lost all their innocence. They've lost the wonder of their childhood. We used to look forward to things, and now what we have 13-year-old children, staying out in the street saying, "Please, government, do something so I can live."
Well, one thing that these young people have done, and I know they had some help maybe from some adults too, is that they brought together a large number of people and they're building connections and talk about why that's so important to dealing with the poverty issues you're going to be talking about.
I think, the thing that they really did, the thing I noticed about Saturday was that everybody was there. There were black people, there were white people, there were brown people, there were people of all persuasions, all income levels, and they were there united in one issue. They were united in one cause, and that's obviously what we as organizers and others, try to do and try to accomplish. I feel they gave me hope that people are willing to stand up now and demand more from their government. We should expect more from our state house. And we should expect more from Charlie Baker, who, in my view, has done a lot of fancy dancing to get to where he is. We need to push our congressional delegations more. These are things that have to be done. And I'd like to think that the converse to what happened on Saturday is that people are going to realize that one of the things that drives this violence in our communities is poverty. And that unless we begin to start taking that issue seriously, because in our view, it's probably the most critical issue facing our country today, this level of poverty and income inequality, with a federal government that's completely abandoned, its citizens. I just think it's something that level of spirit that we had. I'd like to think we can get.
I'm sure some of that's going to be evident on Saturday. So if people want to get more details about the event, it's going to be Saturday at
Saturday,
what time?
March 31st at the Harvard Science Center, which is at 1 Oxford Street in Cambridge. It is better if people want to come. We'll have it. It's all on our website, and we'll put it out there. If they want to come, take the T. There's no parking at Harvard, and Harvard's not giving up free parking spaces. That's why Harvard's so rich. So we're asking people to take the Red Line. It's only like a 3-minute walk from the Red Line. And if they would like to come, please feel free. It is no cost. Feel free to give us a call at 617-942-7577 or email us at umnunity@gmail.com.
Thank you very much for being with us.
No, it's a pleasure seeing you again, old man.
Good. Thank you. You too, Horace.
Thank you, Chris.
Horace Small from
Thank you, my friend.
Union of Minority Neighborhoods. In a moment, a free gathering for Boston gardeners.